He said, paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money and not money itself. He said, but that its paper money abuses also are inevitable, and by breaking up the measure of value makes a lottery of all private property, cannot be denied. Let's go to the next slide, please. And here Thomas Jefferson says, in a letter that he wrote to Eppes in 1813, he says, the trifling economy of paper as a cheaper medium, or its convenience for transmission, weighs nothing in opposition to the advantages of precious metals. He's talking about gold and silver. It is liable to be abused, has been, and is, and forever will be abused in every country in which it's permitted. I mean, how clear can you be? Next slide, please. Scenes are now to take place as will open the eyes of credulity and of insanity itself to the dangers of a paper medium abandoned to the discretion of avarice and swindlers. And the next slide, please. A spirit of gambling in our public paper has seized on too many of our citizens, and we fear it will check our commerce, arts, manufactures, and agriculture unless stopped. And finally, and very importantly, next slide, please. He says, I now deny power of making paper money or anything else a legal tender. Come back to me, please. Now, how strong could Jefferson be? I mean, like I said, he called it a cheat, and in every chance he got, he railed against it. And you know what, folks? Here's the false impression which violates Jewish law. Let's put the next slide up, please. So here's paper money, and here's Jefferson's picture on it. And I don't know if you can read that little print in the upper left-hand side, and it says this note is legal tender for all. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm reading a little writing in place. It's really the legal tender provision for all debts, public and private. Come back to me, please. So even though Jefferson was adamant against paper money, spoke out against it in every turn, the people who run the monetary system in the United States have put his picture on the paper money as if he was endorsing it. This is a false impression, and as I said, this violates Jewish law. Now, what about George Washington? Well, George Washington was one of the richest men in the colonies. He also married a very rich woman. And George Washington, by the end of the Revolution, also railed against paper money. At one point, he is reported to have said that it took a wagon load of money to buy a wagon load of provisions. And, of course, Jefferson wasn't the only one in Virginia to get hurt with paper money. It turned out that virtually all of the gentry, people like Madison and others in Virginia, when the Revolution was coming, they leased their land because they couldn't be there. The British would have taken it away. And the idea was that the people to whom they leased it would pay them an annual stipend. But then when the paper money came, that stipend was paid off pretty much with worthless money. And these very important founders, they got nothing. So they had personal experience with this. They weren't talking in theory. They weren't talking off the top of their heads. They were actually damaged about it. Well, let's see more about what George Washington had to say about paper money. Let's go to the next slide, please. So here, George Washington, on the 1st of August in 1786, wrote to Jefferson, quote, other states are falling into very foolish and wicked plans of emitting paper money. Let's go to the next slide, please. Washington, in his circular letter of June 1783 to the governors of the several United States, wrote that, quote, honesty will be found on every experiment to be the best and only true policy, being convinced that, quote, arguments deduced from this topic could, with pertinency and force, be made use of against any attempt to procure paper currency. So again, Washington again is speaking out against paper money. And then he says, next slide, please. He says, I never have heard, answered Washington in August, and I hope never shall hear any serious mention of a paper emission in this state. So again, Washington again is speaking out against paper money. And then next slide, please. In the summer of 1785, Richard Henry Lee, then President of Congress, warned Washington of a plan formed for issuing a large sum of paper money in the next assembly of their state, adding as his opinion, quote, and this is, the greatest foes in the world could not devise a more effectual plan for ruining Virginia. I should suppose every friend to his country, every honest and sober man, would join heartily to reprobate so nefarious plan of speculation. Come back to me, please. So George Washington, let's come back to me. So George Washington, again, the father of our country, was adamant against paper money. I mean, there can't be any mistake about his feeling. And by the way, Washington was he was the chair of the Constitutional Convention. Jefferson was away at the time, but Washington was one of the founders of the Constitution. And now we go to the next slide, please. And here we see, despite all George Washington's sentiments against paper money, here we see George Washington's picture as though he's endorsing paper money on our $1 bill. And again, on the left-hand side, it says this is a legal tender for all debts, public and private. Come back to me, please. So how much of a false impression can you possibly get? Again, with Jefferson and with Washington, with no uncertain terms speaking against paper money, and now the folks who are running the monetary system, and this goes back a long time. And again, folks, none of these people were Jewish who did this. This was all done by other than Jews. And again, this whole system violates Jewish law because it creates a false impression. It looks as though these people are endorsing the paper money when in fact they were adamantly against it. And what about James Madison? Let's go to the next slide, please. James Madison, at one time President of the United States, wrote, he says, paper money is unjust to its creditors, if a legal tender to its debtors. If not legal tender by increasing the difficulty of getting specie, it is unconstitutional. Now, James Madison is one of the founders of the Constitution. So here you're having it right out of his pen. He says it's unconstitutional, for it affects the rights of property as much as taking away equal value in land. Let's go to the next slide, please. Again, this is James Madison. He says if paper money it is pernicious. He's talking about paper money, destroying confidence between individuals, discouraging commerce, enriching sharpers. Sharpers is what the word today would be the Wall Street people. Vitiating morals, reversing the end of government. When they talk about the end of government, they mean the purpose of government, and conspiring with the examples of other states to disgrace Republican governments in the eyes of mankind. Come back to me, please. Now, how clear could Madison be about this? Discouraging commerce, enriching sharpers, vitiating morals, reversing the purpose of government, conspiring with the examples of other states to disgrace Republican governments in the eyes of mankind. And in fact, in our century and in the 20th century, whenever this paper money collapses, and it always collapses 100% of the time, you always get a regime change. And so government, who is supposedly is to protect the people, is disgraced, and you lose your form of government. And now we go to the next slide, please. And here you see the $5,000 Federal Reserve note, and whose picture is on it? James Madison. Now again, this is an out-and-out violation of Jewish law. They're creating a false impression. This is a Federal Reserve note, and the notion here is that James Madison somehow would have countenanced this, when in fact, in no uncertain terms, James Madison really condemned this in every possible way. Come back to me, please. Now, the people that I've spoken about thus far, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, James Madison, they are not regarded by the Wall Street people as really the how shall I put it? They're not referred to as really the geniuses when it comes to money. The real genius when it came to money, as far as the people in today's world are concerned, was Alexander Hamilton. And Alexander Hamilton, as you may know, was the first Secretary of the Treasury. It was Alexander Hamilton who wrote the Coinage Act of 1792. And it was Alexander Hamilton who founded the Bank of New York, and he was pretty much in bed with the bankers. Nevertheless, Alexander Hamilton was against this as well.